also want to talk about a status of rights, because, you know, we've got this terrible Patriot Act. They snuck it in. It's a horrible thing all the way around. But let me just talk about some of the stuff that you may not have seen. Now, we all know the Federal Reserve was given this private banking cartel back in 1913. There is another document that was passed by Congress in about that same time, and I thought I had it on my computer with me here, but I don't. During that period, same period of time, Congress passed a declaration, get ready, that all property in America belongs to the states. That all property belongs to the states. Now, as a consequence, if you are a homeowner, let's say that you don't have a bank loan, that you have a free and clear property, well, the actual legal status is that you're an equitable lien holder. You have a lien against that property. You don't own the property because the state owns the property. Further, the state and your local counties have taken that property and they put that property up for the surety for all the bond issues and the loans for the schools, the infrastructure of sewers and water systems. Just like the United States is up to its neck in debt, all the counties, for all these bond issues that everybody said, oh yeah, let's, you know, they put it before the voters, and the voters said, yeah, but you know, you've got billions and billions and billions in loans for these things, and your property is the surety for those loans. So give this a thought for a minute. Let's say that China, who's holding $4 trillion of our borrowings, let's say things get worse and we start borrowing more and we start borrowing more. One of these days, a Chinese banker could show up at the front, your front door, and say, guess what? Your county is defaulted on this loan on this property, and now I am going to put the higher lien than your value to recover this surety that you allowed, and you no longer live here. So think about that for a second, because, you know, it isn't going to always take bombs, missiles, invading troops running up the shores of California to take over California. You can become a debtor to the extent that you could lose the property that you think you own. But once again, you're an equitable lien holder, and also, you know, the IRS does the same thing. When they decide that all of a sudden you owe $500,000 against your property, they can come in and put a higher loan and bump you out, a higher lien, and bump you out of first position. So, once again, you don't pay your property taxes. What happens? The property is removed from your possession. You're no longer the lien holder on it. So we don't own property anymore in America. The Founding Fathers, one of the things they came here for was to make sure that you could own property. But unless you have an alloidal title or a land patent, you are nothing more than a lien holder on the property. Bad news. How many people knew that one? Okay, all right, well, that's the problem. You know, if you don't pay the taxes, the next thing you know, you're out the door. And this has nothing to do with even the loan on the house. I'm talking about a free and clear property. You don't own it if it can be removed from your possession. Okay, next thing I want to talk to you about, automobiles. You have an automobile out in the parking lot. Automobile has a California license plate. Let's say that the automobile is fully paid for. So you sit here, you think, well, I own the automobile. Guess what? You have the certificate of title. The state of California has the title. You are driving the state of California's automobile. And the state of California says if you want to drive our automobile, you have to insure the automobile. You have to make sure that you follow all the rules of the road, and you also have to accept all the penalties that come with it. And you have to realize that if you do something like drunk driving, we're going to take our car back. There's even states where if you go solicit a prostitute, they'll sell the car. So you're an equitable lien holder. You know, you can transfer the car on a lien basis to another equitable lien holder, but you are driving the state of California's vehicle. Federal Reserve notes in your pocket. Who do they belong to? Federal Reserve. So if you're driving down the road and you have $15,000 in Federal Reserve notes sitting on the seat, and a police officer pulls you over and he sees these documents, he will pull them and give them to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve says, well, prove that they're yours. Let's see some kind of bank transaction record to show us that you should be in lawful possession. So Federal Reserve notes are non-interest-bearing debt notes. So they're not money, because when on a constitutional basis, money is gold and silver. So here you go. You don't own your home, you're a lien holder. You don't own your car, you're a lien holder. You have temporary use of Federal Reserve notes. In a theory, when they're in a pocket, you have the equitable use, and you have a lien on that as well. So what do you own? Gold and silver. That's it. Gold and silver. Now in 2003, 2004, I went on the George Norrie show, and I think it was the second one, and I told George, because they put the Lear Financial in there, I told George, I said, George, I just sold all my stocks, all my bonds, all my investments, and I bought gold bullion. And I would recommend, because the Lear commercial had just run, I would recommend that all your listeners do the same thing. I was that sure of it, because I watched the markets, and I used to be an S&P trader, and things started to look really bad to me. So I went out and I bought all this gold. And I went and doubled my wealth by doing nothing other than allowing the United States government to mismanage itself. I bought most of the gold at $420, and I think it's closed around $960 or $970 today. And it's going to take off from there. My expectation is it's going higher, because, you keep printing paper, these Federal Reserve notes, non-interest-bearing debt notes. And people tend to think that they're money, but think about it. If gold and silver constitutionally are defined as real value wealth, then everything under the zero line is debt. So that if you do some work for me, and I owe you $100, I give you a $100 United States Federal Reserve note, then I'm discharging your debt with a debt note. So we're awash in debt. These are all IOUs that we're swapping back and forth. And as long as we all think that the emperor's got clothes, then they're worth something. But the problem is, and I've got the chart here to look at, that when you look at the chart that shows the buying power of the Federal Reserve note since 1920, it's lost 94% of its buying power. So if this was a gas tank and we were out at 94% of the gas, we'd be down to 6%. We're not going all that much further. Think about that for a second. And I've heard the stories in Germany about how when their paper currency crashed, that it took a wheelbarrow of paper money to go buy a loaf of bread. And I was thinking, wow, is that really true? Well, I met a 95-year-old lady from Germany about 6 months ago, and I asked her the question. She says, it was true. That's exactly what happened. So I just want, the whole idea of this kind of gathering is to try to gain truth and awareness. And I can only tell you that when I have my assets in gold, and the gold is buried underground, it's not in safety deposit boxes, because when the banks crashed in 29, they put the chains in the doors of these buildings. All the boxes were looted. Most of the boxes. People never saw what they had. So, underground, in the Earth Mother is the way I think people should go with it. And there are different techniques that you use to make sure that if you were to pass away, that other people have some idea where to get, your heirs would get it. But I can tell you what it's done for me is I can put my head on my pillow at night and I can go to sleep. But if I was sitting with my assets in Federal Reserve notes, and of course most of the 401k people have been thrown to the mat for 50% of what they had, the rate in which they are printing this paper, they say they're 11,000 billion in debt now. I like to phrase it that way. A trillion to me is can't even grasp it. 11,000 billion in debt, but if you add Social Security and Medicare obligations, they're 50,000 billion in debt. It's a number that's unsustainable. Now it's unsustainable. And for some reason, I was hoping Obama would be a smart kid. He seems like an intelligent kid. But, how do you spend your way out of indebtedness? I don't understand it. How do you spend your way out of indebtedness? And, of course, bailing out Wall Street, the banks, and the rest of these people that have created the problem, there's no justice in that either. So I'm sure everybody here is pretty in agreement on that. I don't think many of us like to see what assets are left just get squandered away. Anyway, I just wanted to make some political commentary. Now, the bad news for me up here is that I'm flying this lecture aircraft, and I've got 2 of the engines burnt out because I had asked that the technical people here, come up with a projection system for me that would project printed matter. Because my situation is that technology changes so quickly that almost all my archives on things are. Okay, let's move on to one more privacy thing. I had mentioned that Art Bell and myself had this headbutting session where I had listed and talked to him about things that he thought would be okay with him to allow the government to look into. And of course, keep in mind with national security letters that are part of the Patriot Act now, you don't even have warrants for these government people to come in and look at these categories of privacy kinds of accounts. And so, we got to get rid of the Patriot Act. That's the bottom line. We've got to get rid of it. We have to somehow get a court that's going to have the understanding of the Founding Fathers to not allow these kind of gross abuses of these Bill of Rights amendments. But I just want to go through this list of things that you need to think about that the government can just walk with a letter and say, here, give me their information. So I just want to run down the list so that you can think about it and see where you're at with it. The first would be, obviously, bank account statements. Everybody's got a bank account. Well, security agents of Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, they can just now take a national security letter and then go into a bank and say, here, give me all his bank statements. So, right there, everything that's gone through your bank, and that would include credit card purchase statements. One of the things that drives me crazy is if you watch Law and Order, half the time when they're solving a case, the cop walks into the other cop, he says, well, his credit card statements are coming through the fax as we speak. And of course, a lot of times, they are using credit cards to place people at different locations in different times. Because if you're running your card, then that leaves this trail of not only what you buy, but when you bought it and at what time. Stock market and mutual fund statements. These are where your assets, or say your saving assets, are located. IRS tax filing records. There's a real roadmap of where your assets are, what you make, who you work for, and obviously if you're taking deductions, what you spend it on. Credit reporting agency information. These government agents who just run your credit reports, and then they get this whole litany and list of where your assets are and how you spend things and where to go give the rest of the national security letters to get the other information. Landline and cell phone telephone bills. Well, this is really a problem because, recently the courts have told everybody that complained about the NSA getting all the dialed number information, they, during this court lawsuit, came up and said, well, the dial information that the phone companies have in their records belongs to the phone company. Well, wait a second. I called people I wanted to call, and my expectation was that who I call is my business. Well, guess what? That's not the case. Courts say, oh yeah, you want to just take that whole database of 3 years or so, they keep the dial numbers for about 3 years, and just send it to a supercomputer in NASA headquarters. And they'll do what they call data mining, where they start connecting all these phone numbers up to one another, making these gigantic network of information. So now they know who you talked to for the past 3 years. Gasoline credit card statements. Every place you go, within the 200-mile, 300-mile increment of buying another gasoline tank of gas. They know the timeline. They know where you were. They know approximately how much gas you had, how far you could have gone. Cell phone tracking location records, and there's been a lot of controversy about this. Now, this is the way it works. When you have a cell phone and you go from point A to point B and you switch from one tower location to another, because the way cell towers are set up, and I've got some pictures here so you can get a good idea how the setup works. When you go from one cell tower to the next, there's a handoff that's involved. In other words, your cell phone does a handshake going from the tower that you're linked to the tower that you're going to link to. It says, I'm over here, and then there's an exchange of information so that when somebody calls into the system looking for you, the system knows approximately which tower to send the call through. Now that handshake information goes into the database of the cell company. Once again, this is database information that the NSA has now full access to, so they know everywhere that your cell phone has been when it's on for the past 3 years. How does that make you feel? Easy Pass statements. In other words, when you use the Easy Pass, that's the microwave RFID that's in your automobile, so that when you go on those parts of the freeway, they know how to charge you for your use of that freeway, whatever the rate is. But that doesn't mean that those reader systems aren't working in other places, because once the RFID is in the window, any RFID reader that's near the freeway will read your presence. So a lot of people have gotten into trouble for that. They said, oh, I wasn't there, but then the RFID system says, yeah, you were. You got a charge during that time, and that's another tracking. Medical records. Well, this is the big push for these people. Let's get all the medical records on database. That's what we're hearing right now, that we're working real hard on it. The Obama administration wants everybody's medical records on databases now. Well, you can see where that's going. Databases mean that you can move the huge amount of information around, and next thing you know, the NSA is going to say, you know what? Here's a national security letter for that person. Send me over all the data. I want to know all about their health condition. Databases are scary because, as these microchips and as these databases get more powerful and more powerful, your privacy gets smaller and smaller. It's an inverse function. The more powerful the processing chip and the processing systems, the smaller your privacy. Criminal records. Oh, one more thing on the medical records. A sample of your DNA. A sample of your DNA. You get arrested in California, they take a sample of your DNA. That means that you're in that database for whatever use that they plan. At birth, is that right? Well, wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me. Okay, criminal records, arrest records, military records, driver's license records, satellite surveillance. Now, these satellite surveillance systems that they have can go back and look at what's happened for the past couple of weeks. So if there was one of their surveillance satellites traveling in your general area, they would be able to go back and see not only what's visible on the ground, but these satellites have radar in them. They are able to look through the roofs, and they're able to see what bodies are in what locations. This originally was settled because they were flying aircraft around looking for people growing marijuana in the inside of the homes. And so there was a court argument about, well, you busted this guy because you were using infrared equipment to look through the actual home itself, which should be Fourth Amendment protected. So they went back and forth on that, and I don't really think that they're still clear about it, but I know that surveillance radar satellites have the capability of looking straight through your roofs, to at least to determine how many people are there, and of course they probably can determine other structures that are inside your home as well. Now, the NSA partnered with Microsoft on the security portions of the Vista system. How does that make you feel? Backdoor City. That's what it's about. They'll be able to just go straight into the back of your computer and take out whatever they want and never even have to enter your location. The other thing people are concerned about is the Manchurian microchip. What the Manchurian microchip is that all the computer motherboards come from China. And unless anybody really knows how to totally analyze every chip and every architecture of a motherboard, how do we know that the Chinese aren't in position to turn every computer off permanently if there was hostilities between us and them? Think about that for a second. A backdoor switch, a Manchurian microchip, during a period of hostilities to permanently shut off every computer that they've made, and all the computers come from that part of the world. Do you think that would turn things upside down pretty quick? That's almost the Y2K that we were sweating years ago, except it would all really go down on an overnight basis. Cable TV program charges. So every time you go on your cable TV and you order something special, they get a chance to look at those records as well. And of course, now that we've all gone digital, part of what that's all about is we're getting ready for the Big Brother telescreen. Back in the 1984 novel, Winston would have to be in his living room and the Big Brother would be on telling him the propaganda of the day. And there was a camera in the screen. And the camera would be watching at all times. So you would never know when you were really being watched. And Winston says that because that's going on, you can never show any emotion. Your face has to stay emotionless, in which case Big Brother wouldn't have a chance to assess whether you were disagreeing with the propaganda that was coming across the screen. And I only have to tell you now, relating to that you go to Las Vegas and you walk through the door of any major hotel, your face is scanned and it's sent to a database, and you're compared instantly to all the cheats that they know of in their database. So facial recognition is the real deal. So anyway, getting back to this digital TV switch is happening probably today or tomorrow. We're going over to digital, and the idea on the digital is that you're going to be able to do a lot more flexibility relating to two-way communication. Now, I pulled a couple of boxes apart so far that I've gotten a chance to look at. I'm looking for cameras and I'm looking for microphones, and they're not there yet, at least not in these very first units. But it wouldn't surprise me pretty soon, just like you have on standard equipment on a PC. You have a camera these days and you have a microphone. So pretty soon, people aren't going to be real sure whether that TV box that's sitting over there is just giving you entertainment or whether it's actually monitoring you and what's going on in your home. Automobile black box data. All the new automobiles have a black box, and it's just like the aircraft that they fly that gives all the telemetry about what the automobile is doing. Some of them have different amounts of time that falls in memory. Some are 10 minutes, some are maybe perhaps longer. So anything that goes on in your car where the car gets in an accident, you don't get a hold of that black box because your insurance company confiscates it out of the car. In other words, if you get in an accident and the car's taken to a junkyard, your insurance agent is over there taking that box and they plug it in and analyze it. Internet browsing records and Google searches. Think about that for a second. Everything that you ever asked into Google could be sitting on the NSA servers. Passport and travel databases. Every place that you've gone using a passport, and of course the new passports are going to have the RFIDs in them. So then, any place that you pass that's got a reader is going to read your passport at a distance. The whole idea of that is that when you're online to pass over a border, they're going to scan you 3 cars back, and by the time you come up to the customs agent, he's going to have on his screen all your information. Everybody's in the car. Now, on this list, I just want to go back to the Art Bell show. I said, Art, okay, these are the things that I'm concerned about. And Art, and I said, do you have a problem with the government just going ahead and having these things in a database somewhere? And Art Bell shockingly said to me, he said, no, I don't have a problem with it. He said, if you're not doing anything wrong, why were you worried about it? I couldn't believe it, because I thought this man was something special in terms of all that he built. But, something happened. Something happened. I don't know what happened, but something happened. The only thing out of that list that I just read that Art Bell had an objection to was them having his DNA. Out of that long list. And of course the Founding Fathers put the Fourth Amendment in place because they feel the government shouldn't have any of your information unless there's a reasonable cause that you committed a crime. There is one client that I had, I have to tell you this one quick story. There's a client that I had in the Los Angeles area, and he was interested in Muslim faith. He went down to a local library and he was looking up Muslim information in Al Jazeera and a bunch of the other stuff. He was there, and the people in the library saw what he was looking at. So somebody called the Homeland Security, and on this particular date, 2 Homeland Securities in suits show up with a street police officer from the area. And they told the librarian, we're going to take this guy out of here. So they get him, he's sitting there with his computer linked to the library system. They fold his computer up, close it, and they take him out to a white van in the parking lot. They seize him. In other words, he's seized. They put him in the van, and a technician in the van downloads his hard drive. And the other 2 interview him, want to know, why are you looking at this information about Muslims in these countries? He said, I'm just doing research, and I have interest in blah, blah, blah. So he said, where's your warrant for taking my hard drive? He said, well, we didn't need a warrant. It's the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. They copied his hard drive and told him, you're a naughty boy, don't look at this stuff anymore. And they let him go back in the library with his PC. Makes me angry. Does it make you angry? What is going on in America? Well, here's the other thing you need to know about the court system. I did want to make one more comment because I do law. This is the interesting thing that they did to us. We originally had constitutional power, and when you went into courtrooms, the flag was the constitutional flag, which is the one without the fringe, because the fringe flag is the flag of the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief. But when you're in a military court, then the venue and the flag is a military flag. Now you go anywhere in almost any public building in America and they're flying military flags. What they did is they moved all law into contract law so that everything is based on offer and acceptance. You get offered a contract for a service or anything else, and you sign the contract, and then you're bound contractually. Now, what they've tried to do is for you to exchange your rights for privileges, driver's licenses. So what you do is you go in and you sign this one little form, but actually when you signed the form and made the contract with the state, you gave up your driving unencumbered for now being involved with buying all the laws and regulations, which in the book in California is about that thick. That's what you bought. It's called an adhesion contract. An adhesion contract means, maybe one sheet saying, yeah, I want a driver's license, but the adhesion portion is that you bought the book. The whole book is now your responsibility to know relating to laws of the road and also penalties and everything else. So everything's in contract law now. And you may notice also that anytime anything comes to you with your name on it, it's all in capital letters. A normal flesh and blood individual's name like mine would be capital R, lowercase O-G-E-R, uppercase TOLCES, because when you look at the U.S. Styles Manual, the U.S. Styles Manual tells you that flesh and blood people are stated in that manner in terms of the style. But when you receive these other offers and things, it's all in capital letters, which is characteristic of a fictitious name entity. Now, on Sunday, when you look at your newspaper and you see that there's fictitious name filings, you'll see that if somebody's opening Joe's hot dog stand, they will have all capital letters. And so as a consequence, what they moved us to is the status of being a fictitious name entity. You're the surety for that trust. In other words, you're like the owner of Joe's hot dog stand. But anytime you get involved with courts or anything like that, they're going to address you as that fictitious entity, and therefore they can keep all of it in contract law, and you can't go in the court and say, Your Honor, I want to invoke my constitutional rights. Well, you can't do that because you are a fictitious entity. You're Joe's hot dog stand. Joe's hot dog stand doesn't have any rights like that. So I just wanted to be aware to watch out for but anytime you get involved with courts or anything like that, they're going to address you as that fictitious entity, and therefore they can keep all of it in contract law, and you can't go in the court and say, Your Honor, I want to invoke my constitutional rights. Well, you can't do that because you are a fictitious entity. You're Joe's hot dog stand. Joe's hot dog stand doesn't have any rights like that. So I just wanted to be aware to watch out for contracts. You know, when I have contracts put in front of me and they say I sign under penalty of perjury, I scratch it right out. I scratch out under penalty of perjury. And you can say I declare that when you scratch it out that the following is true and correct. But you got a Fifth Amendment right not to get yourself into these jams, and knowing the Constitution will really help. Okay, since I have a shorter period of time here, we're going to move forward. I want to show you this. This is one of my favorite little signs. Can you see it? Can you see it? The brainwashed never wondered. Okay, there we go. Is that working better? We made this up, and I love it. The brainwashed never wondered. They don't. Now, the nice thing about a group like this is that you're not brainwashed. You're here for the truth. You want to know things. You are not the brainwashed. At least they haven't gotten to you yet. You're still here, and, that's a feather in your cap. Your brain's still operating. You don't have the question mark. You're not with the sheeple. You're not going over the cliff with the rest of the sheeple. And hopefully we co-influence one another to be able to continue forward and do some of the things we need to do to reclaim our nation. Okay, this is a cartoon. You can't read it, but this is an NSA one. I love this one. He says, we're tapping your phone. Amazing thing, though, is that, countries have karma as well. And when Russell Means was here yesterday, you think back on what the United States military did to rounding his people up in concentration camps. They gave them blankets with smallpox. Up in one of the areas where I have a home up there in Idaho, they put the Shoshone and Bannock, who hated one another. They were long-term warring tribes. They put them on the same reservation, hoping that they'd kill each other off. We genocided the South American people, the Vietnam people. We're working on the Iraqi people. So karma is a big deal. And America, may think it's going to go rolling on 200, 300 years, but you know something? Ain't going to happen. You can't go around genociding other human beings and expect that your life is going to be fine. It's not going to happen. Okay, I'm going to jump over to electronic harassment, and this is where people take electronic weapons. Let me just read the definition. Electronic harassment happens if somebody uses any electronic device to aid themselves in invading your person or your property for the purpose of gathering information illegally or for the purpose of causing harm. This is electronic harassment. This is the electronic harassment pages on my website, which you can go visit. It's, once again, it's bugsweeps.com. Info electronic harassment. There's a little box on the front page. One of the items that's on the front page on the right there is a modified microwave oven. So people say, well, how can people get a hold of these energy weapons? The government has all the energy weapons. Nobody has energy weapons. Well, guess what? If you have a 1200 watt microwave oven in your home and you peel the side of the oven open which I had a case where these people did that. They were got in a conflict with their neighbors. And what they did is they peeled the microwave open on the side, and then they went, and this is a diagram that you can see on the internet, and they faced this weapon through the walls. And microwaves go right through the walls like they weren't there. So they radiated the next apartment and the next 2 apartments down. Each apartment, the people were getting sicker and sicker. And after I did this story, I talked about it on Coast to Coast. I had these people call me up and say, well, can you send me the plans? Oh, man, I tell you, and it fries you what it does. And first of all, let me just say something about microwave. Isn't it a little odd? They say, don't even operate the microwave, or don't even stand near close to the microwave when it's operating because it's unhealthy. Well, here you got this klystron tube that's in it, and what it does is it puts 2.4 gigahertz into the food, and it vibrates the molecules at this frequency. And so once the food comes out, it's secondary emission. The heat coming off the food is 2.4 gigahertz. And then you take this food and you throw it down your throat into your digestive tract. Number 2 cause of death in America versus heart attack. What's the second one? Digestive tract cancer. 1980, when I did the research, and there's a doctor called Dr. Herzl that did the original research on it. It was out of Sweden because that's where the original microwaves came from. And he did the research and he found it was terrible for rats. I mean, it was horrible for everything. The original microwave company was thinking he'd come up with a great report. He says, look at this, it's killing my rats. And they said, oh, well, thank you for the report. That's all we need. We'll take the report now. But he ended up releasing the report and they put him in prison. The report's still around. And so what happens is microwave vibrates molecules in a whole different way than human beings have been eating food for the billions of years we've heated over a fire. It's a whole different dynamic. And when I read all the information myself back in 1980, I lifted my microwave up and threw it in the dumpster. And I had to, and now I have to go to these places like Denny's if I'm on the road. I said, well, do you microwave the food? And they'll say, oh, yeah. Well, I said, well, I don't want my food microwaved. You don't? Vegetables. Normally it's the vegetables, not the mains, not the meat mains. It's the vegetables. So ask if you go to a restaurant whether they're microwaving your food and don't eat it. It's radiation, basically radiation. Jumping over to radiation, on my website, once again, here is a picture of active denial. This is the military's microwave weapon. And what it does is it fries people. It's a 95 gigahertz, 1 million watt thing on a truck, and you just go and you aim it at people and you burn them. And there's a video also, there's a demonstration video on YouTube. If you put in active denial, you will see the video. And the video will give you, they actually showed the machine, and they had a reporter that was brave enough to stand out there, and he got radiated and had to hit the ground in about 2 seconds because they were toasting him. Now, here's the other problem, microwave towers. Okay, here's the little part of my website where you click on this tower, and it will show you how they're concealing microwave towers these days. That is this document. They've got them in church steeples, flag poles, utility poles, flagpole, a Christian cross for a church. They've got them in phony buildings. They've got them in, let me pull up. They've got them in different kinds of chimneys, different kinds of enclosures. Here's a water tower. Here's a clock. So, trees as well. Yeah, the phony trees. So anyway, here's what you've got.